There's been dozens of movies about Batman since the creation of the character. There's some that are considered not so great, some that are just okay, and some that are held in pretty high regard. Some of those ones in high regard would be the Dark Knight trilogy, Mask of the Phantasm, and I personally really like Batman vs. Dracula. However, I think there's a Batman movie that isn't talked about enough for how amazing it is. Which Batman movie is this, you might ask? Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker. I know the title of this video is a little clickbaity, but to be 100% honest, I'm not sure if this is, in my opinion, the best Batman movie ever. I've always told myself and others that, in my opinion, the best Batman movie is The Dark Knight from 2008. But there's definitely some aspects of this movie that make it a real good competitor. So I'm going to give you 3 reasons why this movie might be the best Batman movie. We're going to look at the story, the tone, and the characterization. Before I jump into those aspects of the movie, I did want to make a couple side notes. One being, I just love the music in this movie. I think it's fantastic. And the second being a pretty common thing people who watch this movie say, and that's that the Joker reveal scene is absolutely amazing. Throughout this video essay, I'm inevitably going to make some comparisons to The Dark Knight, and this scene kind of reminds me of the bank robbery scene where Joker reveals himself at the end. Alright, and then some quick background in case you haven't seen the movie in a while. We're back in Neo Gotham, and this takes place during Batman Beyond Season 3. Essentially, the Joker returns, and we don't know why or how. This is a big part of the story that we find out later on. Terry, along with Bruce from the sidelines, have to deal with the Joker and his gang, and they learn some pretty crazy secrets along the way. So let me just say, the story in this is absolutely amazing. I was about 3 or 4 when this movie came out, and I loved the Batman Beyond show, and I watched most of Batman the Animated Series. Throughout the duration of the Batman Beyond show, we see Terry face off against some of his own foes, but also some of Bruce's foes from the past. We saw an episode with Mr. Freeze, we saw an episode with Bane, we saw an episode with Ra's al Ghul, and more. However, the villain in this movie is what really makes it different. I feel like I don't need to explain how or why the Joker hits different compared to Batman's other enemies. The Clown Prince of Crime is arguably DC's best character and easily the best villain. Although while I was a kid, I loved Batman Beyond and Batman the Animated Series. Of the 2 shows, Batman Beyond was my favorite and the Joker was my favorite character overall. So for 4 or 5-year-old me, this was a dream come true. My favorite Batman versus the Joker, a matchup that I never anticipated to see. Going into this movie, there's just so much setup that creates this crazy sense of anticipation. Up until this point, we've seen the Joker many times in the DCAU, so we know a lot of his history, how he interacts with other characters, and why he's so iconic. And as I mentioned earlier, this movie dives into many mysteries and we find out a bunch of secrets about the DCAU. One of the biggest ones being what happened to the Joker. I just want to say I love the tone of this movie. It's easily one of the darkest entries in the DCAU, let alone of the Batman movies. Pretty crazy to think about this because the Batman Beyond show aired on Kids WB. There's even a deleted scene that I think would have been amazing had it made it to the final version of the film. Bruce goes to Arkham to look for Joker's body as he believes him to be dead. Terry tails him, and what he finds is so disturbing. He looks up at the ceiling and sees the original Joker's body hanging from the ceiling. It cuts to a creepy shot showing the Joker's face was smiling when he died. The idea behind the scene was even creepier. From what I could gather, it seems as if the new Joker had taken the original Joker's body and hung him from the ceiling. He knew that Bruce would come back to check for the Joker's body, so this is kind of like an aha moment. It's so disturbing, and I think that's ultimately the reason it didn't make it into the film. Throughout the entire movie, there's this sense of seriousness and tension surrounding Bruce when the Joker returns. We know that it isn't possible for the same Joker to be around after all this time. Bruce is a lot more quiet after the Joker returns, and we as the audience know that there's more to the story than he's telling. But we'll come back to that. As far as tone goes, we also get this great scene after Bruce and Terry have a falling out. The Joker ambushes Bruce while he's alone. And although I haven't watched a Batman Beyond breakdown in a decent amount of time, I'm pretty sure this has been talked about, but I wanted to point it out anyways. Does this scene not remind you of the very first episode of Batman Beyond? It's strikingly similar to when Terry lost his dad. About 30 minutes into the movie, we get that scene. I feel like every movie has that scene. What I mean by this is a scene in a movie that sticks out more than any other. Usually it elicits some sort of reaction. And this is probably the most revealing scene of the entire movie. We go back in time to when Bruce was in his prime. The Joker kidnaps Tim Drake's Robin, and when I say that this scene is terrifying, my god is it terrifying. The Joker shows Batman via a homemade movie all of the pain that Robin endured, and he reveals the secrets that Tim Drake told him. And to put the cherry on top, he makes fun of Bruce for having no parents. The tone in this scene is absolutely chilling, and the monologue delivered by Mark Hamill is definitely his best. This is one of the very few scenes in a movie I could watch over and over. The scene ends with Batman brutally attacking the Joker, and he ends up getting bested by the Joker. Harley Quinn supposedly dies, and we see Joker Jr. kill the Joker. The characterization in the movie is fairly consistent with the show. About 22 minutes into the movie, Bruce has a falling out with Terry. Upon watching this the first time, the viewer might think that Bruce is being too cruel, but after watching the flashback that we just discussed, we understand Bruce's motivation. Bruce is actually scared. He's scared Terry will have a fate similar to Tim Drake's. He obviously cares for Terry and doesn't want him to be harmed, but he would also feel like it's his responsibility like he did with Tim Drake, because he allowed Terry to be Batman as he allowed Tim Drake to be Robin. And with that said, I can't imagine how Bruce felt during this scene. He's helplessly watching what he thinks might be another Tim Drake situation. Then we have the best scene of characterization in the entire movie. This is seen in the final fight with Joker and Terry. When looking at all the scenes in this movie, including that dark flashback, I would say this is probably my favorite scene in the movie. Terry and Joker start fighting towards the end of the movie, and after a bit they stop fighting, and I notice something. That same something is also in 2008's The Dark Knight. The idea that the conclusion of the movie isn't just a one-dimensional fight to see who gets the most punches. In The Dark Knight, the Joker says,
"You didn't think I'd risk losing the battle for Gotham's soul in a fistfight with you."
So the Joker in this movie had another plan. He had a backup. It wasn't just a fight to see who wins. We see the same thing in Return of the Joker, except it's on Terry's side. Let me explain. Bruce, when he was in his prime, was very grim. He didn't talk much and he just used his fists for everything. It was the Joker who did the talking. Bruce even acknowledges this in the movie. However, this is how we see Terry is different than Bruce. He's not just another Batman. He's put his own spin on the character. And this is the way that they show characterization in a genius way that also leads to the conclusion of the film. When I said that Terry is different than Bruce and he isn't just another Batman, this is how. Terry does what Bruce could never do. Talk back.
Wait, I like to talk too.
We see this because as they continue to fight, he starts to mock the Joker and get in his head. It's a great contrast to everything we've seen in the DCAU for the Joker. This is because the Joker is usually the one getting in everyone else's head. We then get the final part of the fight, which reminds me a lot of Into the Spider-Verse.
Ha ha.
Hey.
The laser the Joker is using is stopped and the day is saved. After Terry has a discussion with Tim Drake, he bumps into Bruce in the hallway. Bruce reiterates a common concept, the concept that it isn't the suit or the powers, it's the person underneath. We get the equivalent of a Spider-Man final swing and Terry flies away into the night. Since I watched this movie in the year 2000, I've been absolutely obsessed. Overall, I think this movie should be talked about a lot more, and I think that there's aspects of it that are just completely genius. Thank you for watching.